On the day we celebrated the 50th wedding anniversary of our in-laws, I arrived late and pulled along my son to introduce him to Sael, Abigail.
This is my son, Mark. Mark, say hello.
I'm Mark. I'm 5 years old. Mark clung to me and looked at Abigail, shyly greeting her.
Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability.
Before I could finish, Abigail blurted out.
EW, what a monster. Don't let it spread to my kids.
In that moment, both Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband didn't say anything, but his look of discomfort was evident, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and rigid. I couldn't believe what was being said to such a young child, filled with disbelief. Not knowing what to say to the insensitive remarks of Abigail and her company, I stood there motionless until I heard a voice from beside me. Do people hate me again? Mark looked down, desperately trying to hold back tears. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child.
It's not contagious. He has albinism, which just means he was born with less pigment. Still a disease, it can spread. Scarlett, get rid of that ugly kid fast. Get out.
My husband was trembling with anger. During the heated argument, tears fell from Mark's eyes. Interrupting Kevin, who seemed ready to confront Abigail, F.I.L. Robert spoke up.
That's enough. Don't ever come back.
The relief was visible on Abigail and her husband's faces. They smiled triumphantly as if they had found someone who understood them. But their smiles quickly turned to surprise.
What? Dad, what are you doing?
My name is Harper, a 40-year-old housewife living with my husband, Kevin, and our son, Mark. Only 5 years ago, the thought of living happily as a family of 3 was unimaginable. Kevin and I had always wanted children but were unable to conceive. I desperately wanted a child, and so did Kevin, which led us to seek fertility treatments at a hospital. There were days when it was hard to see pregnant women in the waiting room, reminding me that children are a gift. Despite careful diet and health management, I often wondered why I couldn't have a child, leading to days filled with self-loathing. The fertility treatments were not only emotionally taxing but also a financial burden, leading to many tearful nights. During those times, the person who was always there to support me was none other than Kevin. His encouragement, holding my hand, and accompanying me to the hospital were incredibly reassuring. It's okay, I'm sure our baby is just waiting for the right time to come to us. Miraculously, his words gave me hope, and I became more positive. The following year, our efforts paid off, and I became pregnant, sharing the news with in-laws Robert and Chloe, who were overjoyed. The baby grew healthy inside me, and we looked forward to the delivery day. On the day of birth, hearing the lively cries, I was deeply relieved and eagerly wished to see the baby's face. Yet, the child born had skin and hair so white and delicate, it seemed touching could break them, like an angel. Needless to say, Kevin and I were astonished. We were confused, as no one in our families had such an appearance.
Why?
The doctor explained our child had oculocutaneous albinism, a congenital condition known as albinism.
Albinism? The 1 in 20,000 people.
It's a disease associated not just with physical appearance but also vision problems and sensitivity to sunlight. I regretted not being able to give birth to a normal child after fertility treatments. However, seeing the baby, all that mattered faded away, and we embraced our child fully.
Doesn't matter if it's a rare disease. Our child is as beautiful and precious as an angel.
Exactly. This child chose us. Thank you, thank you. Thus, Kevin and I accepted our long-awaited baby positively and with hope. We named the child Mark and decided to raise him with love. Introducing him as our angel to the in-laws, they initially surprised, eventually warmed up to Mark's innocent smile. "It might be hard, but you two will surely overcome everything. If you ever need help, we're here for you." The in-laws accepted and promised to love and care for him together. Mark's main concerns were managing sunlight exposure and weak vision. When going outside, sunscreen is essential, and Mark also needs assistive devices for his vision. However, now, thanks to the internet, connecting with friends who share the same concerns has lessened the feeling of struggling alone. There are several considerations in Mark's life, but otherwise, he's a healthy and mischievous boy. Kevin and I are delighted to see Mark increasingly doing things on his own, and before we knew it, 4-5 years had flown by. During this time, we visited the in-laws' house for Christmas, long weekends, and whenever the timing was right. The in-laws live about a 10-minute bus ride away, and from the station, Robert always picks us up in his car, mindful of Mark's condition. "Thank you, always." "No problem. I can't wait to see my grandson." Once in the car, Mark always brightened up. Certainly, he liked cars, but there was a more pressing issue for him: the stares from others. When on the bus, some people would gawk or recoil at Mark's appearance, whispering or turning away. There were even times when people pointed their phone cameras at him, leading us to ask them to stop and shielding Mark from their view. Such actions deeply saddened me as a mother and sometimes made me angry, wondering why they would do such things. Affected by these stares, Mark would shrink into himself on the bus. Especially since turning 5, he would hide behind me or Kevin, or cling to Robert and Chloe, curling up small. Thinking how hard it must be for Mark himself tightened my chest with pain. One night, before bed, Mark asked, "Mom, Dad, am I weird? Does everyone dislike me? Why would you think that?" I replied, "Because, in the train, everyone looks at me so much." Hearing Mark express his feelings was heart-wrenching, and I've never felt more distressed. Kevin seemed troubled too, his brows slightly furrowed. I pulled Mark close, looked him in the eyes, and assured him, "You're not weird, and nobody dislikes you. Even if people look, you can hold your head high." With tears welling up in his eyes, he listened to my words and simply replied, "Okay, I understand. Mark, how about you sleep with Dad tonight?" "Okay. Read me a story?" Excited, Kevin headed to the bedroom with Mark. Watching them, I stayed in the living room, sighing. The 50th anniversary celebration for Robert and Chloe is coming up, and I'm a bit worried. At kindergarten, there are teachers to support and friends who are told about Mark's condition, which offers some comfort, but public places are a different story. Struggling with this challenge, discussing with friends, Mark, Kevin, and I were all searching for solutions. Recently, Kevin brought up the 50th wedding anniversary celebration of the in-laws. Abigail, my sister-in-law living far away, would be coming, and it was suggested we celebrate grandly with her family. Mark hasn't met Abigail yet. It might be a good opportunity, don't you think, Scarlett? Abigail too? Truthfully, I didn't have the best impression of Sale Abigail. Her family moves often due to her husband's job, and I've only met them once or twice. When Mark was born, I sent a letter but received no reply. Worried they didn't care about our family, I felt anxious about introducing Mark. When I shared my concerns, Kevin reassured me with a smile. "It'll be okay. Abigail isn't that bad, and her husband has always been nice to me." "Okay," I conceded, perhaps overly concerned about others' judgments. Maybe Abigail and her husband are genuinely kind, and the lack of response to my letter was just due to their circumstances. If they're coming all this way to celebrate their parents' 50th anniversary, we shouldn't dismiss their intent. While I could handle any comments about me, I worried whether Mark would be accepted or subjected to stares like on the bus, but we agreed to include Sael's family. And so, with lingering anxiety, we approached the day of the 50th anniversary celebration. Due to flight schedules, Sael's family would arrive later. For this special day, instead of Robert's car, Kevin and I escorted the in-laws to a high-end restaurant. Because we had a reservation, I said, "I'm Harper." And the receptionist led us to our room. Robert and Chloe, smiling happily, held Mark's hand as they walked to their seats. The stylish space, fitting about 10 people, was lit with soft lighting, creating a calm atmosphere. "Grandpa and Grandma are happy." "I'm happy too."
"Yes, Mark is happy too."
Mark seemed to understand today was special, smiling more than usual. He was dressed in new clothes bought for the occasion, looking even cuter, which made the staff lady smile. After some time chatting, Sael's family arrived late. They appeared in formal attire, and Scarlett, Mark's cousin, was also dressed in a cute outfit. "Sorry we're late." "Dad, Mom, congratulations today." Abigail dropped her bag and greeted Robert and Chloe. Of course, Abigail's husband and Scarlett smiled and said,
"Congratulations."
When they settled, I nervously greeted Sael's family. Abigail, long time no see. Thank you for coming all this way today."
Right."
However, she responded indifferently, as if she barely knew me. Gathering my courage, I brought Mark over to introduce him.
This is my son, Mark." "Say hello, Mark."
"I'm Mark, 5 years old." Mark clung to me and shyly greeted Abigail.
"Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability."
Before I could finish, Abigail bluntly said,
"EW, what a monster. Don't let it spread to us."
Instantly, Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband, without saying a word, clearly looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and stiff. I was filled with disbelief at what was said to such a young child. Not knowing what to say to the inconsiderate Abigails, I stood there motionless, but then I was brought back to reality by a voice from beside me. "Am I disliked again?" Mark looked anxious, holding my hand. Laughing, Abigail said,
"Yeah, nobody wants to see Mark's face."
Mark looked down, trying hard not to cry. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child. I thought about slapping Abigail right there, but hugged Mark tightly instead.
"What are you saying, Abigail? That's not true." "That's right. Abigail, how could you say that?"
Chloe hugged me and Mark in defense.
"EW, what? Mom, you're defending that monster? It's gross, like, it's all white and has white hair. Is it contagious? Get it away if it's going to spread." "It's not contagious. It doesn't spread. He has albinism, a condition of being born with less pigment."
"So, it is a disease. It could spread. Why did you bring him?" "Stay away." "Scarlett, stay back." "Abigail, don't say that. Mark is not a monster, nor is it contagious. Don't treat him like a leper."
"Kevin, is that really your child? Unbelievable."
"Why don't you understand, Abigail?"
"Just get rid of that ugly kid, fast. Get out."
Kevin's hands trembled with anger. During the heated argument, tears streamed down Mark's face. Intervening before Kevin could confront Abigail, Robert spoke up.
"That's enough. Don't ever come back."
Relieved were only Abigail and her husband. They seemed to have found an ally, their faces wearing a triumphant look as if to say so. But that smile quickly vanished, turning into a look of surprise.
What? Dad, what are you doing?
Robert had grabbed Abigail and her husband's bags and threw them out of the room. Then, after clapping his hands together, he turned back to the astonished couple.
To treat a polite child who greeted you upon meeting for the first time like this. That's not my daughter. You are the monsters. I don't want to see such ugly faces. But Dad, what if you and Mom catch it? I'm worried. No need to worry. If you had the heart to worry about me, you could have considered Mark's feelings too. Why didn't you? No, come on, that's just not normal, no matter how you look at it. Stop saying such heartless things. Get out now.
Abigail's couple was taken aback by Robert's demeanor, unseen by Kevin and me before. They seemed to want to say something more, but then a voice exclaimed,
Stop it!
All eyes, including Kevin's, turned to the source. Surprisingly, it was Scarlett, dressed in her cute outfit. Her cheeks flushed.
Albinism isn't contagious, and he's not a monster. Why would you say that? Dad and Mom, that's awful.
She declared this with all her might, tears streaming down her face. That alone showed she was angry and hurt for Mark, which made me incredibly happy. Yet, Abigail harshly responded to her daughter.
Scarlett, be quiet. You don't know anything. You're the one who doesn't know anything, Mom. I'm so embarrassed right now. Hating Mark without even trying to understand him. I hate a mom and dad like that.
Scarlett's almost shouting voice turned Abigail's couple pale. Undeterred, Scarlett ran to Mark, towering slightly like an older sister, and gently stroked his head. Don't cry. You should smile. You're not a monster, and you're not disliked. The people who say that are wrong.
Yeah.
Both Scarlett and Mark's faces were smeared with tears and runny noses. It was difficult to get Abigail and her husband to understand Mark, but Scarlett was different, which was reassuring. Seeing Scarlett approach Mark and pat his head, Abigail seemed to snap out of it, hastily leaving with her husband without a word. The commotion drew the attention of other patrons outside, likely making Abigail's family feel unwelcome. While some staff members asked patrons to return to their seats, we resumed our conversation as if nothing had happened. The rest of the meal went smoothly, without tears or derogatory words, marking a peaceful time. After the 50th wedding anniversary celebration ended, and we returned to our usual lives, I was struck by a question. How did Scarlett know about albinism?
Kevin, did you talk to her on the phone? No, I haven't. I thought you had told her, Harper.
Wondering how she knew about Mark without us telling her, we received a letter. The sender was Scarlett, who had apparently gotten our address from Robert and Chloe. The letter, written on cute heart pattern stationery like that of a young girl, contained her earnest words. After dinner that day, we decided to read the letter together. The letter began with "To Mark's mom and dad," sharing Scarlett's personal thoughts on people with albinism. Scarlett, due to her parents' moves, had changed schools several times, about 3 in total. At one of her previous schools, there was a child with albinism similar to Mark. This child had white hair and wore special glasses for poor vision, but after the teacher's explanation, all classmates respected and treated the child well. And Scarlett liked that child. Without discrimination against anyone, not minding their own disability, and being kind to everyone, she found them genuinely cool and fell for them.
Even with poor eyesight, they had great hearing, were good at singing, and could play the piano. I wanted to be as kind as them, but Mom was different.
On a day when parents gathered, seeing the albino child with Scarlett, Abigail frowned immediately.
Scarlett, Who's that child? Dyeing hair in elementary school? And those ugly glasses don't suit at all. You shouldn't play with that child, okay? Understand?
Saying so, she complained. Scarlett was filled with disbelief and felt very upset. Shocked and frustrated at her inability to retort her mother's heartless words.
So, I felt relieved when I could finally speak up about Mark.
Reading the letter made me feel warm, realizing Scarlett had been harboring those feelings during the 50th wedding anniversary celebration. Later, Scarlett settled in her current school and, driven by a desire to be understood, read an essay on albino awareness during an open class.
My parents labeled my cousin a monster without trying to understand albinism. I think those who say such things have monstrous hearts.
I hope more people understand albinism and refrain from saying terrible things like my parents did. I wish for a class where everyone respects each other as they did at my previous school, where a composition read on open day, advocating for mutual respect, was highly praised. At the same time, Abigail and her husband faced condemning stares and were embarrassed. Following that open day, they were viewed coldly by other parents in the neighborhood, and Scarlett was scolded by Abigail. But she seemed unfazed, hoping to grow up to be someone who can eloquently explain and support people with albinism. Please be kind and stand tall, Mark. I'll do my best too. See you. The letter ended with this message, accompanied by a cartoon character sticker that seemed like it could come from a girl's magazine, saying, "Your ally." Of course, Mark still can't read well, nor does he fully understand the meaning of the words. But when I carefully explained how to read it, Mark, with a happy smile, excitedly shouted,
"Ally, ally."
Seeing this made both Kevin and I happy, and we all ended up laughing together. In fact, since the day of the 50th wedding anniversary celebration, Mark, perhaps remembering Scarlett's words, has always stood tall, never shrinking, whether on the bus or at kindergarten. What kind of mental change occurred, I'm not sure, but it seems Mark has understood Scarlett's words in his own way. When going to meet the in-laws, as usual, we got on the bus and sat down. Some high school girls who seemed to have finished school early were talking about Mark. Covering their mouths, but their eyes laughing. "What's that?" "White hair." I was considering changing seats, but then I noticed Mark had also seen the girls and was staring back at them.
"Mark?"
When I called out to him, Mark, still looking at the high school girls, smiled back at them. Surprised, perhaps, the girls moved away, flustered. There were other times when we were talked about or stared at, but Mark began to smile back each time. The speakers would feel guilty, stopping their gossip and diverting their attention to their phones. It seems to be Mark's own way of handling situations, though I wondered where he learned such diplomacy. But upon reflection, Scarlett had encouraged him that day.
"Don't cry, just smile."
Those words must have resonated with Mark. It's not that there are no more people who mock or stare or demean based on appearance. In fact, we'll likely encounter more such people. Seeing Mark not just protected by me, his mom, but protecting himself, made me feel incredibly proud of his growth. Our child is striving to live with strength. Maybe it's thanks to Scarlett. I often think, if only there were more kind-hearted children like Scarlett. Discussing this with friends, I found support among other moms, leading to small educational gatherings in public spaces. If both those directly involved and those around them can understand each other, surely we can connect kind-hearted people and create a slightly kinder world than today. I hope for a world where more people, like Scarlett, understand and treat those with disabilities without discrimination, making it a better place for Mark to live positively.
"There is no seat of mine."
Olivia, oh, your seat? I canceled it.
"Ava."
Today is the wedding ceremony of my dear brother, Jack. Me, his real sister, not having a seat at the groom's side is unthinkable.
What do you mean by cancelled? Oh dear. I mean exactly what I said. Your seat isn't here anymore.
Laughing almost cartoonishly, adorned with numerous necklaces and bracelets, is Ava, the bride's mom. To me, she's just my sister-in-law's mom, not someone I usually interact with much.
But, as it turns out, Ava and I have a bit of history.
I'm Olivia, a 25-year-old singer. Since childhood, I've pursued my dream, enduring hardships and disappointments, but 3 years ago, I passed a crucial audition. That led to hit songs, and now I'm busy with solo concerts and TV appearances. I met my husband, Michael, at work, and we married a year ago. Both my professional and personal life are thriving. It's all thanks to the support of my family. Especially my brother, Jack, who's always been here for me. He had been claiming to me as, "I'm your first fan since my debut." However, in the entertainment industry, I sometimes face criticism for being frivolous or chasing dreams endlessly. When Jack's marriage was decided, my biggest concern was exactly this.
I worried if Jack would be badmouthed by his wife's family because of my career, but Mary and Ava, his wife and mother-in-law, smiled and supported my work. I was so happy with that, yet I never imagined today's wedding turning out like this.
Come on, how long will you stand there? You're obstructing the other guests. Please leave quickly.
What are you talking about? Today is my brother's important wedding. I'm definitely attending. How many times do I have to tell you? You don't have a seat. Just go home immediately.
Then, a staff member from the venue, seemingly unable to watch any longer, came to help. If there's been a mistake, we can arrange a seat for you. What would you like to?
It's fine. Today is my daughter's wedding. The presence of someone like her would only lower the grade of the ceremony. No need for unnecessary interference.
What do you mean by that?
Don't you get it? I don't want someone with a frivolous job like yours in my family. I cannot let that comment go. Please retract it.
Where did I go wrong?
I'm proud of my job. Just because you're a bit famous, you act so high and mighty.
You're just a one-hit wonder, aren't you?
You'll fade away soon enough. I was so stunned by her words that I fell silent.
My husband Michael, perhaps out of anger, had gone pale and was glaring at Ava.
Was Ava really so pleased with our situation?
She dramatically spread her arms wide with a triumphant look. Her heavy bracelets clanged loudly. If you really want to attend badly, there's one condition. If you can meet it, you're welcome at the wedding. All right, let's hear it for now. Though I was thinking, what kind of condition? I prepared to listen. Ava's face twisted into an even more satisfied, mocking smile.
Quit your singing career. Then, I'll allow you to attend.
I couldn't help but raise my voice at Ava's outrageous suggestion. Ava snorted arrogantly. Her expression seemed to say, "There's no way you could do that."
She knew I couldn't accept such a condition and seemed to enjoy seeing me struggle.
You can't do it, can you? You always put yourself first. Your job is more important to you than your own brother, isn't it?
Such a selfish and detestable woman. There's no place for you here. Just leave.
Shocked by her cruel words, my husband Michael started to retort, but I pulled his arm to stop him.
Michael looked at me unhappily, but I shook my head slightly and then faced Ava squarely. Understood. Then, we'll leave here.
What?
Michael, let's go.
Wait a minute. This is your own brother's wedding, are you sure? Ava seemed panicked as I began to leave the venue, was saying nonsensical things.
My reaction must have been quite different from what Ava had expected.
Perhaps she thought I would be crying, begging, "Please let me attend the ceremony."
Right after leaving the venue, I heard Ava's screeching voice. How insolent!
But I didn't stop. As I walked down the corridor, I heard someone calling my name from behind. Turning around, I saw Jack running towards me, looking frantic.
Sis, I heard everything. This is unbelievable, truly unacceptable.
Jack, calm down a bit.
How can I stay calm in this situation?
Michael and I had to soothe an agitated Jack together. Once he calmed down a bit, I took a deep breath and faced him. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't mean to cause trouble on your special day. This isn't something you should apologize for, sis. But why would Ava say something like that? Well, anyway, now things happened like this, I'm calling off the wedding. Then it's my turn to be surprised.
What? Wait a minute. That's too much.
I can't have a wedding feeling like this.
But what about Mary?
I'm fine with it. Surprised by the unexpected voice, I turned to see Mary standing there. Dressed in a beautiful white wedding gown, Mary looked like a fairy, but her face was clouded with sadness. This pained my heart even more. I'm sorry that my mom's behavior. I don't understand why she did that. It's not Mary's fault. But I can't go on with the wedding knowing I've caused you such distress. We'll explain it to the guests. So, sis, don't worry about it. All right. But don't push yourselves too hard. Sis, I'm sorry. I'll come and apologize properly later. I'm very sorry. Mary. Tears streamed down Mary's face as she apologized repeatedly, and I felt like crying too. What should have been the happiest day of her life was ruined.
This made me even angrier at Ava.
But there was nothing more we could do there. Michael and I left the venue with feeling terrible. According to Jack, who called me that night. When Ava heard the wedding was cancelled, she was furious. Seemingly oblivious that she was the cause, although she ranted about the preparations and the money spent. However, an angry, tearful Mary and Ava's husband, now aware of the situation, scolded her, and she reluctantly backed down. Jack and Mary told the guests that a family member had fallen ill as an apology. Not revealing the truth was probably their way of showing some mercy to Ava. Thinking of their feelings, I felt deeply saddened. How did things end up like this? While Jack and Mary's support was comforting, but I couldn't help feeling down, blaming myself for being a singer. A week later, Michael and I visited Jack's house. We had received a call from Jack and Mary, who wanted Ava to join them in making a formal apology. They should be the ones coming to our house. Ava absolutely refuses to do that.
Are they really sorry then?
I think so too, but considering Jack and Mary's feelings. I didn't want to see Ava, but after hearing Jack and Mary's earnest apologies on the phone, I couldn't refuse. Besides, I had something important to resolve. Sis, sorry for bothering you today. Mom, come on, greet them properly. They apologized repeatedly as we arrived. Ava, looking displeased, merely muttered, "Oh, hello." Seeing this, an almost tearful Mary scolded her. I was beyond anger, so already wanting to leave, but I didn't. Because Jack urged, "Please come in." Michael and I sat down, opposite side was Jack and Mary, with Ava also seated. It's about. Mary began. I wanted to be a singer. It's embarrassing now.
There's nothing embarrassing about it. Mary has more talent than anyone.
Mom, please be quiet. As you can see, she was more enthusiastic about me becoming a singer than I was.
Singing is the perfect career for Mary.
Please, just be quiet. Ava, about to start shouting, was silenced by Mary's firm words. Of course, singing was my dream too. But as I realized there were better singers out there, my desire faded. Yet, Mom insisted I become a singer. So, 3 years ago, in my graduation year, I promised the audition I took that would be my last. If I passed, I'd pursue singing, but if I failed, I'd give up. And I failed.
It wasn't just a failure. You made it to the final round. You were almost successful.
As Ava exclaimed, I was intrigued by the audition 3 years ago. It was the same audition that kick-started my career as a singer. I had a suspicion. Mary, was that the audition?
Yes. The same one Olivia passed. I participated too.
I hadn't realized it at all. You only care about yourself, don't you?
Such an unpleasant woman.
Mary, with tears in her eyes, reproached Ava, who spat out her words with vehemence.
As I watched the two of them, I finally felt a sense of understanding.
Hearing Mary's story, Ava's past behavior finally made sense to me. And seeing Ava's attitude now, I decided to go through with the decision I had secretly made.
I finally understand, Ava.
Oh, what's with that look? How insolent.
Honestly, I wasn't sure whether to say this or not.
After all, you're Jack's mother-in-law.
I didn't want to make a fuss.
What do you mean? Ava, you've been saying it all along, haven't you?
To introduce Mary for a singing job or to refer her to my agency.
Eh? Mom, you said that?
That was just small talk. Even for small talk, it felt like big pressure. You became more aggressive when I didn't take you seriously, and recently, you even threatened to sell my private photos to a tabloid if I didn't introduce her.
Hey, that's practically threatening. Jack, enraged, leaned forward, but I gestured for him to stay calm. Next to him, Mary opened and closed her mouth in disbelief. She might have been too shocked to find words, not expecting her own mom to do such things.
I felt a bit guilty, but I couldn't stop now. The incident at the wedding ceremony, was it your way of getting back at me because things didn't go your way? Mom, did you really do such a terrible thing? That is. You coward. Bringing this up in front of Mary.
I knew Ava didn't want Mary to know about her actions. Mary would be hurt if she found out. That's why I had been hesitant to say anything. But I had explained the situation to Michael, then he nodded slightly at me from beside of me. Ava was ignoring Mary's attempts to stop her, approached me, veins throbbing on her temples.
Let me make it clear. Mary has far more potential as a singer than you. If it weren't for you, she would have passed the audition. She could have been a singer, even a star. I let her marry into a less impressive family, thinking it might lead to a singing opportunity for her. How dare you take advantage of my kindness?
Ava's intensity silenced not just me, but Jack and even Mary. As we stood there stunned, Ava continued her irrational tirade. You probably used some dirty tricks to pass that audition, didn't you? Bribed the judges, maybe even seduced them. You seem like the type of doing that really well. Even now, who knows what you're doing to get work?
Mom, please stop.
Mary's tearful plea seemed unheard by Ava. I was so overwhelmed, I didn't know whether to be angry or sad. Then, Michael spoke up.
Olivia passed the audition on her merit.
Aren't you a sweet husband?
But your wife's popularity is just a fluke. Likewise, Mary failing the audition was a matter of merit.
Michael's firm tone even caught Ava off guard.
I remember that audition 3 years ago well. All the finalists were closely matched in talent. But Olivia had the strongest determination to become a singer.
What right do you have to say that? You're not even involved.
I am involved.
Huh?
I was a judge at that audition. I'm Michael, a music producer.
Michael, the famous music producer Michael? Michael is known as a famous music producer whose works are all hits. Even those not well-versed in music have likely heard his name. He seldom appears in the media, so his face isn't widely recognized. That's why it's understandable that Ava hadn't recognized him. Ava blinked in surprise for a while, but then approached Michael with a sly smile. I had no idea that you were the famous Michael. You should have told me sooner. What would you have done if I had?
Of course, I would have introduced Mary to you. She's a diamond in the rough. With your help, Michael, she could become a star singer. Enough, Mom. Do you even know what you're saying? Be quiet. I will make Mary a singer, no matter what. Stop it, please.
Mary yelled with a voice that sounded to shake the room, tears streaming down her face as she glared at Ava. Her face was red with anger, fists clenched tightly, clearly furious from the bottom of her heart.
In conclusion, Mom just wanted to make me a singer for her own vanity and desires. That's the worst. How can you say such things to your mother? A parent's dream is their child's dream. Children have a duty to fulfill their parents' dreams. Don't you understand that? I gave birth to a child with a talent for singing, just for this.
Don't talk nonsense.
The one talking nonsense is you. You could have been rich and famous. What a disappointment.
That's it, I've had enough. I'm cutting ties with you, Mom.
What? Are you out of your mind? From this moment, you are a stranger to me. Please leave. Mary, don't joke around like that. Get out.
Mary, with a strength that belied her slender arms, pulled Ava and pushed her outside the door. Ava, having been thrown out, angrily pounded on the door. When Mary threatened to call the police if she didn't quiet down, Ava's anger turned to tears and pleading.
Mary, why are you doing this to me? I've always done everything for you. Still saying that. Apologize to Olivia, you shameless woman.
Watching Mary shout pained to me, but I was glad she stood by me to the end.
I secretly decided that if Jack and Mary would have another wedding, I will definitely support them.
3 months after the incident with Ava. Ava, disowned by Mary, was also divorced and kicked out of her home by her husband. It was discovered that she had secretly incurred debts in her efforts to make Mary a singer. She faced claims for damages to her family and me, as well as the wedding cancellation fees, which further increased her debts. Now, she's living modestly, working part-time to repay her debts. Having been a housewife for so long, it's been tough for Ava to work outside. She frequently contacts Mary, saying, "We're family, after all." But Mary firmly rejects her each time. This experience taught me that being a well-known name can unexpectedly attract resentment. Although having achieved my dream, I consider myself fortunate and will continue to work hard as a singer. The compensation money from Ava was given to Jack and Mary, which they used for their rescheduled wedding. Seeing them finally happy was a great joy for me. Finally, my sister Whitney has given birth. Our family was overjoyed, and even though it wasn't Christmas, relatives gathered together. The stars of the show were, of course, Whitney and her baby. With food and drinks ready, the party began. After we all toasted, my husband Brad approached Whitney and the baby. Whitney handed the baby to Brad, and he held the baby in his arms. Brad looked at the baby with such a loving gaze, as if he were holding his own child.
Hello, baby. Oh, you're so cute.
After admiring the baby, he turned to me and said, "If only you could actually have kids." Followed by a sigh.
Still really cute. Wonder who it looks like.
He insulted me in front of all the relatives, seemingly unaware of the icy atmosphere that followed. In the frozen silence, the family gathered around Brad and Whitney, enclosing them. Whitney and Brad, engrossed with the baby, hadn't noticed until Whitney's husband Chuck spoke up.
It really doesn't seem to take after me. There are elements of Whitney, though.
He confronted Brad calmly. It seemed Whitney and Brad finally noticed the awkward air. Surrounded by relatives, they looked to be huddling together. Overall, Brad. It seems to take after you, don't you think? Donald, Brad's dad, added insult to injury.
Really now? Brad, it's the spitting image of you when you were little.
His tone was cold, unfitting for the celebration.
Eh?
Seeing Brad taken aback, I couldn't help but let out a smile. Brad had no idea that I had been laying the groundwork with the relatives. I'm Zoe, 42 years old. My life has been nothing extraordinary. Not academically gifted, nor athletically talented. Not the type to stand out, I've probably been forgotten by my classmates, leading a plain life. I have a younger sister, Whitney. Unlike me, Whitney is beautiful and stylish. Though our age difference spared me from blatant comparisons, from what I saw, Whitney was adored by many from a young age. Becoming a show-off in elementary school worked to her advantage, making her a central figure in her class. People gravitated towards her, regardless of gender, and after school, friends were always coming over. As she grew older, perhaps thinking little of my plainness, Whitney would say, "Zoe, you're so plain. Make sure not to show your face when my friends are over." Ignoring me even when her friends weren't around. Confused by Whitney's attitude and feeling uneasy around my own sister, I decided to move out. I had a job lined up and had saved some money from working part-time while attending college. So I moved out without anyone stopping me. It was lonely at times, but being alone was more comfortable than being nagged by Whitney. Occasionally, when I visited home, I heard from Mom that Whitney's behavior seemed to be getting worse year by year. By the time she was in high school, Whitney started going after people's boyfriends. And Mom would come to me for advice. But since I had no experience with love, all I could do was try to console Mom. In the end, Whitney never changed, and Mom's worries never ceased. I became close to a senior coworker while working together on a project. His name was Brad. He was 2 years older than me, someone I had been on the same team with since the last project. I had never been approached by men before, but after the project ended and we all went out for drinks, he asked for my contact information. Even while drinking, I was the sober one, taking care of drunk colleagues and supporting the organizer, which apparently caught his attention.
"How about we go out for dinner, just the two of us?"
Thinking he had asked for my contact for work-related reasons, I was surprised by his sudden invitation. Finding no reason to decline and thinking this would be a one-time thing, I accepted his invitation. However, when we actually sat down to eat and talk, we got along so well that time flew by. Unable to suppress the feeling that I didn't want it to end with just this once, I found myself saying, "May I have the pleasure of inviting you out next time," in a surprising move. Perhaps it was the alcohol talking. I was flustered after saying those words. Brad looked stunned. "Oh no."
I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. I meant for work advice, not that. I didn't have any ulterior motive."
I rushed to explain, wanting to run away from the embarrassment. Then, ulterior motive. "You're an interesting person, Zoe." Brad burst out laughing.
"I'd be happier if it was with ulterior motives."
Suddenly serious, Brad took my arm. "Shall we go to another place?" I quietly nodded and followed Brad. I'll never forget that night. Even after we got married, we would laugh about it when recalling that time. My first love at 28 felt embarrassing, but he accepted me and took the lead. With him, my once plain life seemed to blossom into something beautiful. At 28, I finally understood what love was, and I gained confidence. 2 years later, he proposed, and we got married. Me, Zoe, 30 years old. Married at a nice round age. And with a new name, I decided to start a new life. I got along well with Brad's parents, especially Mael, as if we were friends. The common mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict was non-existent for us. Whitney, attending our wedding, seemed enraptured by the atmosphere, barely acknowledging me. After the ceremony, as Brad and I were heading to the next venue, Whitney ran up to us.
"Zoe, today's wedding was so beautiful. It makes me want to get married soon too."
Any past resentment seemed gone. Whitney smiled at me.
"It's about time I settled down too. Not just any man will do. I'll find the right one and have a wedding that everyone can celebrate."
It seemed our wedding made her crave a normal happiness. Declaring her intention to change, Whitney left. I was stunned by our brief exchange, but wanted to believe in her words of change. If my image had cast a positive light on Whitney, then I was satisfied. Feeling that years of resentment had dissipated made me genuinely happy. I looked forward to having face-to-face conversations in the future. Since my marriage, Mom's worries shifted from Whitney to me. Yes, about children. Getting married at 30, I understood my parents' eagerness to see grandchildren. Of course, I wanted children too. I was working but planned to quit if I had a child. Initially, I hadn't thought deeply about it, but as time went on, I grew tired of Mom's constant nudging. Wanting to respond to my parents' feelings, I began to excessively consult with Brad. Initially, Brad took it lightly, saying, "Don't rush, it'll happen when it's meant to." However, as I repeatedly brought up the same concerns,
"Come on, I'm tired today. Let's not talk about this anymore,"
he started to visibly show his annoyance. 5 years into our marriage, we hadn't had children, and by that time, Brad seemed to have given up. I was 35 before I knew it. Nowadays, it's not uncommon for people older than me to have children. But I knew I was reaching the age where I had to prepare myself. I knew that if we truly wanted children, we would have to undergo the appropriate tests and treatments. And I was aware of how difficult that could be. Brad was saying, even without children, we have the option to enjoy life together. But I couldn't give up. Should we try getting tested, just once? Holding on to a last hope, I asked Brad. Brad was reluctant but agreed to go to the hospital. Perhaps thinking that if a problem was identified with either of us, I would give up. However, Brad's attitude became colder after we went for the tests. When we went back to the hospital to get the results, I understood why Brad was being cold. The issue with not being able to have children was on Brad's side. Unable to accept the test results, perhaps because of his pride, Brad started to take out his frustration on me. Unable to maintain a happy relationship, all I could do was wait for him to calm down. 3 years later, Brad's demeanor had improved compared to back then. But he still came home late or not at all sometimes. By that time, Whitney had finally found someone to marry. It had been 8 years since our wedding, and it seemed she had struggled a lot during that time. Her habit of playing around since her younger days was hard to break. And even when she found someone good, she would quickly lose interest, so relationships didn't last. However, the man Whitney found this time was broad-minded enough to accept all of her past actions. Moreover, we learned at their wedding that Whitney's husband was an elite businessman working for a major trading company. How they met and got to the point of marriage was unclear, but seeing Whitney happy reminded me of my own early marriage days. I hadn't imagined things turning out this way back then. Still, I believed that marrying Brad was my happiness. Even without children, we could still make it as a couple. Watching Whitney in her wedding dress, I reaffirmed my love for Brad in my heart. Realizing that children were not in the cards for Brad and me, Mom shifted her hopes to Whitney. Honestly, I was relieved to no longer be pressured by Mom. Whitney was still in her 20s and likely to meet Mom's expectations. Somewhere inside, I too had hopes for Whitney. 3 years later, the grandchild Mom had been longing for was finally on its way, growing inside Whitney. Mom cried and thanked Whitney when she found out. Hearing this news, I felt like my worries were finally over. It had been such a long journey to this day. My relationship with Brad wasn't great, but I hoped this could be a turning point. We hadn't spoken much lately. Whenever he did open his mouth, it was only to make snide remarks, but Brad's attitudes seemed to change when he learned about Whitney's pregnancy. Perhaps he felt guilty towards my mom for us not being able to have children. As Whitney's belly grew, conversations with Brad increased. Whitney's due date was drawing close. At home, the anticipation for the first grandchild made Dad and Mom restless. And then, Whitney finally gave birth. Our family was overjoyed, and relatives gathered together even though it wasn't Christmas. Attending Whitney's baby shower were Brad and me. Brad's parents, Whitney and my dad and mom, and Whitney's husband Chuck and his parents. It was the first time so many relatives had gathered together. The stars of the show were, of course, Whitney and her baby. I was busy in the kitchen preparing the food and drinks. With everything ready, the party started. After we all toasted, Brad approached Whitney and the baby. Whitney handed the baby to Brad, and he held the baby in his arms. Normally, showing a baby to relatives would be a common sight, but something felt off. Brad looked at the baby with such a loving gaze, as if he were holding his own child. The affection he showed towards his wife's sister's child seemed a bit too intense. Without caring about that, Brad held the baby and murmured, "Hello, baby. Ah, you're so cute." After showering the baby with love, he turned to me and bitterly said, "If only you could actually have kids." Followed by a sigh. "Still really cute. Wonder who it looks like." He insulted me in front of all the relatives, seemingly unaware of the icy atmosphere that followed. In the frozen silence, my dad, Brad's parents, Chuck, and his parents gathered around Brad and Whitney, enclosing them. Whitney and Brad, engrossed with the baby, hadn't noticed until Chuck finally spoke up. "Really, it doesn't seem to take after me. It seems to have few similarities with Whitney too." He calmly confronted Brad. It seemed Whitney and Brad finally noticed the awkward air. Surrounded by relatives, they appeared to be huddling together. "Overall, Brad, it seems to take after you, don't you think?" Brad's dad added to the tension, saying, "Indeed. Brad, it's the spitting image of you when you were little." His voice was cold, inappropriate for the celebration. Seeing Brad taken aback, I couldn't help but smile. Brad was unaware that I had been laying the groundwork with the relatives. Months ago, I happened to see Brad's mobile phone. That day, I had taken the morning off to go to the hospital and found Brad's phone left on the dining table. Thinking to deliver it to him at work later, I was about to put it in my bag when the phone vibrated. Curiosity led me to glance at the screen, displaying a message from Whitney. "Your baby is growing bigger." My blood ran cold. Next, I was seething with anger. Whitney was trying to steal Brad. Given Whitney's past behavior, there was no doubt in my mind. To confirm, I looked at the message exchange between Whitney and Brad. It was an affair. Whitney planned to pass Brad's child as Chuck's. Brad was waiting for the right time to divorce me and remarry Whitney. I took photos of the message exchange as evidence. Since then, I've acted oblivious. Brad's parents believed me immediately due to our close relationship. They also felt sorry for their son's actions. I approached Chuck about it once before Whitney gave birth. He seemed to have had suspicions about Whitney's pregnancy. Showing him the evidence, he agreed to my plan. And so, we've come to this moment. Brad, caught off guard, while Whitney smiled brightly. "Stop it, everyone, that's such a bad joke," she said, feigning innocence. "Would you stop your bad jokes?" The voice trembled with anger. I felt sorry for asking everyone to play along until now. And Whitney seemed to finally sense the deep loathing in his angry voice. Whitney's complexion changed. Noticing this, Brad stepped in to defend her. "Hey, Whitney's just tired from giving birth. No need to speak like that." I confronted Brad, fueled by the future he planned for his mistress. "I see you can be kind for the sake of your future wife." I showed him the screen of his mobile phone. The photo of the message exchange with Whitney. Brad, shocked then glaring, yelled,
"What the hell is this?"
He stood up, grabbing me by the collar.
"When did you start doing such dirty things?"
He didn't even try to make excuses. It would have been better if he had tried to explain it was all a misunderstanding. When he raised his fist at me, Chuck intervened.
"Stop raising your hand to a woman."
The grip Chuck had on Brad's arm was forceful. Brad shook off his hand and retorted in frustration.
"Saying that. Aren't you two the ones in a shady relationship?"
Retreating while rubbing his grabbed arm. Whitney, seizing the moment, jumped into the fray.
"Yeah. Instead of doubting Brad and me, you should be looking into these too."
However, it seemed like no one was listening to her. The silence was broken by me and Whitney's dad. Enough, Whitney. Dad had always been a man of few words. He was gentle and, according to Mom, sometimes too soft, never getting angry at Whitney's misbehavior. But this time, he couldn't stay silent. "It's your bad habit, isn't it? I thought you had changed after getting married, but stealing your sister's husband." Dad spoke quietly but with a voice as cold as ice to Whitney. "I should have scolded you more. I didn't want you to see me like this." After giving me a sorrowful look, Dad slapped Whitney's cheek hard.
"Ouch!"
Looking down at Whitney holding her cheek, he sighed and then turned to Brad.
"No, Donald. It's not like that. This is all a misunderstanding."
Brad finally tried to defend himself just as Dad's fist hit him. Brad crumpled to the ground. Then, Dad loudly said to them,
"The pain you're feeling is nothing compared to what Zoe and Chuck went through. Do you understand?"
Whitney's sobbing could be heard, though it was doubtful if her tears were from remorse. Dad turned to Chuck and his parents to apologize deeply. "I'm truly sorry for the unforgivable act my daughter has committed." Mom also apologized next to Dad. Then to Brad's parents, "I'm sorry for raising my hand to Brad in front of you," apologizing deeply once again. Brad's parents also apologized to us.
"What is this? I did nothing wrong."
Brad began to shout, breaking the silence.
"It's all because Zoe is infertile."
What a pitiful sight.
"So, it's not my fault."
Whitney also started to struggle.
"It's Zoe's fault. Having such a wonderful husband but not being able to bear children. So I decided to have his child instead."
Whitney seemed to realize midway. No one was on their side. Cold stares were fixed on them. I decided to make it clear. "Listen, Whitney." I struggled to keep my anger from seeping into my gentle tone. "The cause of infertility wasn't me."
"Wah!"
Whitney was stunned. "We had fertility tests done." Everyone listened silently to my voice. "The results showed that Brad was the cause." The room went quiet.
"Wah! No, that."
Whitney's eyes began to dart around. A habit when she's hiding something.
"Brad? That's a lie, right?"
Whitney confronted Brad, but he was deflated.
"I don't accept those test results."
Brad couldn't accept that he was the one unable to have children, but I showed the hospital's test result papers. Dad and Mom looked at the evidence, and from Whitney's reaction, it seemed they realized something.
"Whitney, whose child is that baby really?"
Delivering the final blow.
"It's Chuck's child, obviously."
She seemed unaware that her story was changing by the moment.
"Then, to put Chuck's mind at ease, why not do a DNA test?"
Whitney's eyes darted around nervously.
"There's no need for that. It's Chuck's child."
Mom approached Whitney, speaking to her with the gentleness one uses with a small child. Whitney, let's get tested, shall we? I want to believe you, Whitney. Let me believe you this time. Her voice trembled towards the end. Mom was sobbing, huddled over.
You're old enough, Whitney. It's time to take responsibility.
Dad told Whitney, then apologized again to everyone gathered. He promised to report the results later, and Whitney's baby celebration party came to an end. Whitney stubbornly refused the DNA test, but her attitude only spurred our parents more. Dad tried to persuade Whitney himself, but she wasn't willing to listen. Eventually, without Whitney's consent, the test was forcibly conducted. Meanwhile, I had moved out of the house I shared with Brad. Brad, still not accepting his infertility, joked, "So, Whitney will move in after you leave." But I was already starting the divorce proceedings, undistracted. Months after the family gathering, Mom contacted me about Whitney's DNA test results. We were to return to our parents' house to hear the outcome. Brad, Chuck, and I listened intently to the results, which were unexpected by all. A heavy sigh escaped everyone's lips. The father of Whitney's child was neither Chuck nor Brad.
What on earth does this mean?
Dad couldn't contain his anger, even more furious than when he had slapped Whitney.
What does this mean, you say?
Whitney asked rhetorically, but no one supported her.
Whitney, explain yourself.
Chuck admonished her in a low voice. Resigned, perhaps realizing she couldn't escape the truth any longer, Whitney explained in a small voice.
I don't know who the father is. Chuck was so busy with work right after we got married, and I felt so lonely.
Her voice gradually turned whiny.
It's not my fault Chuck made me feel lonely, right? The child is innocent. Let's pretend that night never happened. Please.
Whitney moved closer to Chuck, not Brad.
So, what about you and Brad?
Chuck asked gently.
Right. Brad was just for fun. I was entertaining him because things weren't going well with Zoe.
Whitney glanced at Brad and laughed. Besides, Brad may come from a wealthy family, but he's so stingy. He never spoiled me. Chuck, you're the only one for me. Whitney clung to Chuck's arm. Brad, faced with the realization of his infertility and Whitney's abandonment, was just staring blankly. So it is. Chuck muttered softly, then forcefully shook off Whitney's clinging arm. Whitney fell off the couch, but Chuck stood up, towering over her. I've had enough. Talking to you any further is a waste of time. His eyes filled with hatred and sorrow. Dad and Mom said, we'll send the divorce papers later. Thank you for everything up to now. Without giving Whitney another look, Chuck left the house. It's the expected outcome, Mom said, placing a hand on Whitney's shoulder.
From now on, you're nothing to me. Leave this house immediately.
Mom had always ultimately accepted Whitney despite her behavior. But this time it seemed she had reached her limit. I've been too lenient. But don't worry, I won't bother with you anymore. Live strong on your own. We had never seen Mom react so coldly before. But her resolve seemed firm, as if she had come to a clear decision. Dad agreed with her decision, and it was decided that Whitney would be kicked out of the house. So, how long do you plan to stay here? I asked Brad, who was left behind. Brad slowly looked up at me. Then, as if realizing something too late, he asked, Zoe, that kid wasn't mine, right?
If so, I'm innocent. Whitney was just playing around, as she said. So, why don't we call off the divorce and start over?
I was speechless. After all the mocking, he had the nerve to say that.
I have no intention of starting over with you. I wish I never have to see you again. So please, leave this house right now.
I grabbed a mop nearby and hit Brad with it.
Get out now!
I shouted as I chased him out. Later, I finalized the divorce with Brad. I had gotten along well with Mil and wanted to keep in touch, but it wasn't to be. Mil and I had a farewell meal together, mourning our separation. Upon learning of my divorce with Brad, Whitney, who had been hesitant, agreed to divorce Chuck and finally left the family home. She seemed to intend to move in with Brad, but he refused her. Brad, too, was no longer in a position to support Whitney financially. After our divorce, Brad left his job due to discomfort at our shared workplace. He tried to help with the family business but became estranged from his family and is now looking for new employment while surviving on part-time work. Of course, with alimony payments to me, his life is far from easy. Whitney moving in would be nothing but a nuisance, especially considering she played with his feelings. Shunned by her family, abandoned by Brad, and pursued by Chuck for alimony. Whitney began to drift through the night streets, escaping from everything. But she wasn't the type to attract ordinary men anymore. Once relying on her beauty, post-pregnancy Whitney did nothing to restore her figure, losing all remnants of her past glory. Unable to escape the glory of being adored in her youth, she became obsessed with a man she met in a nightclub. Drowning in debt and resorting to selling herself, she has fallen to a point of no return. Dad and Mom hired a detective agency to track Whitney's whereabouts, determined never to let her return home. They sold the family home and moved to a condominium in the next town. Mom, sharing this with me, looked sad but resolved not to extend a helping hand to Whitney. If her life were in danger, that'd be different. But that's it. We've decided not to do anything more. Mom's too gentle to bear Whitney's current state, but knows extending help again wouldn't lead to her reform. This is what being a mom is about. Though I never had children of my own, witnessing Mom's compassion and strength fills me with respect. Dad and Mom have taken in Whitney's child, who is nearly 2 years old. His rapid growth is astonishing, and I've been experiencing childcare during visits to my parents' house. I wonder what kind of adult this child without Dad or Mom will become. Yet, I'm determined to shower him with enough love to never feel lesser for it. Today, once again, I received an email from Mom about Whitney's child. We are planning to go on a trip together on the next day off. On my way home from work, I looked up at the night sky and wished for the child's growth. May he grow up to be honest, bright, and earnest. And then, I returned to my solitary apartment, where no one waits.
Don't make cakes that taste bad. It looked suspicious, so I tasted it first. I felt it so unhealthy, though I threw the garbage out the window.
In an instant, I realized this situation was a complete disaster.
You threw away the cake? I'm still at work.
I am Karen. I'm 28 years old and work at a bank. I got married last year and am still in the honeymoon phase. My husband, Mark, is 30 and works as a pharmacist. We met on social media, of all places. I love music and often post about my favorite artists. Mark shared my passion for music. At first, we communicated through direct messages. I was hesitant to meet someone I knew only in social media. But, strangely, I found myself wanting to meet Mark. He lived about an hour's drive away, it's not far from my home. I figured a meal would be harmless, so I gathered the courage to meet him. Surprisingly, I felt completely at ease, as if we'd met before. Our conversation flowed without a break. I found myself passionately talking about our favorite artists. Perhaps because we'd been in touch every day, there was a strangely close feeling. After that, we went out for meals a few times. From good morning to good night, we were in constant contact. Before I knew it, I was eagerly awaiting his messages. And then we officially started dating. It was surprising, even to myself. My mom passed away from illness soon after I started working. We had a close relationship, like friends. Being from a single-parent family, I felt very lonely. That's when Mark came into my life.
To me, Mark was a savior.
He's also very dedicated to his work. When we're together, Mark seems most animated when talking about work. He listens attentively to my work-related issues and supports me.
That's what I love about Mark.
Mark's mother, Jane, has been incredibly kind since when we started dating. Knowing I don't have parents.
Karen, you can tell me anything. Whether it's troubles or complaints, anything is fine. I want to be close to you. Let's not be formal and just be ourselves.
She always looked out for me. Eating out is nice, but homemade meals are good once in a while, right? She would say like that, and invited me to enjoy her home cooking. When Mark proposed and we decided to get married, she cried tears of joy. Since I don't have parents, we decided not to have a wedding.
Jane, understanding and kind, was all right with that.
After we got married, Jane moved in with us. Mark's father passed away when he was young, and Jane raised him single-handedly. In today's world, where it's normal for women to work, but some people still oppose it.
One of a friend of mine struggled with this problem, so it was on my mind. I love my job and wanted to continue working even after getting married.
But I got married, it wasn't just about what I wanted. When I talked to Jane about this, "Isn't it wonderful to enjoy your work? Of course, I'll help you. I'll do the household chores, so don't worry. It makes me happy to have a job to do. I get restless if I'm not doing something. Leave the cleaning and doing laundry to me." She understood and supported my desire to work, making mother-in-law issues non-existent.
Going out with Jane on days when Mark at work is really fun.
Though everything seems perfect, there is someone I struggle with. Mark has an older brother, Tom, and his wife, Betty. Tom got married 6 years ago and has a 5-year-old daughter, Sally. When we first met after our marriage was decided,
"You seem like you're good at sucking up, getting along well with Jane."
Lucky for you. Her comment, which sounded like sarcasm, left me speechless at our first meeting. I tried to minimize contact with her, but it's not always easy. Betty often leaves Sally with Jane. "I'm going for a drink today, so please let her stay over. She's picky with food, so just give her some bread for now."
She would hand over a single Danish before leaving for her weekly outings. Even if she loves Danish, eating the same thing over and over isn't good.
Jane would say this with a wry smile. But Sally is a really picky eater, only eating sweets or Danish. Sally is smaller than other kids her age. I was a bit concerned but didn't think too deeply about it because she seemed healthy.
Jane adored Sally.
Although I had doubts about Betty's weekly outings, but it made Jane happy, so I let it be. Betty, a stay-at-home wife, dislikes working women. She wasn't pleased about me working. When Mark and I were getting married,
marriage only makes sense with someone who can perfectly manage household chores. Carefully choose someone who can handle quality ingredients to avoid getting sick.
Usually, working women are arrogant, so think it through. She was negative towards me. Betty is stubborn and set in her ways, rarely listening to others. Thanks to Jane's support, Mark and I were able to get married. Even after our marriage, Betty would insult me whenever she saw me.
A woman's worth is in childbearing, not just working.
Start raising kids early.
I doubt you're cut out for it. Working and parenting are totally different.
Career women always seem so self-centered. She constantly belittled me. Amidst this, we decided to celebrate Jane's 60th birthday. Since she's always been so kind, I wanted to do something special for her. Due to a pandemic, we planned to have it at home. As the host of the party, I was in charge of cooking. I knew Jane's favorite dishes and was excited planning the menu. The number of attendees was 6 in total, including my family and Tom's family. I planned to take the afternoon off to prepare for the day. But, due to a sudden issue at work, I had to work the whole day. Such last-minute changes were common in my job, So, I had to adjust my plans. I had planned to cook in the afternoon, but that was no longer possible. I quickly ordered the steaks and appetizers I had previously thought of. When I told Mark about this, "I'll probably finish work earlier, so I can pick them up. Don't worry. The steak will be a hit." I was relieved that we could start at the planned time. I was also planning a surprise,
which made me smile just thinking about it.
Just as I was about to finish work, I received a call.
It was from Betty. She rarely made phone calls, so I wondered what was up. She sounded in a bad mood. "Hey, Karen. Where are you for Jane's 60th birthday celebration? Get ready quickly. You said you were in charge of cooking, but I bet you haven't done anything. I only feed my child with organic products, so don't buy anything weird. Make sure the dishes are photogenic. And where's the key? I can't get in."
She was aggressive right from the start. With so many complaints, I didn't know what to respond to first.
But I wasn't late.
There was still over an hour until the meeting time, but she acted as if I was delaying things. Also as the food, but all expenses were on us. So she really wasn't in a position to complain.
"Betty, aren't you come a bit early? There's no one at home right now. Mark will be home soon, so you can ask him then let you in."
Her voice sounded as irritated because she wanted to get into the house early. I think she just came early because she had nothing else to do.
"Hurry up! Waiting in this heat is like telling to get heat stroke," she said. "Please wait in your car to avoid the heat. It won't be much longer. Sorry."
After I said this,
"Hurry up! I don't want to waste gas."
And she hung up abruptly. It seemed she was upset because Jane happened to be out and nobody was home. I contacted to Mark, and he said he was almost home, so I left her to him.
The thought of going back was daunting.
Because of worrying about Betty's behavior, I decided to call Mark before heading home to check on things. Then, I learned that Sally was happily playing in a plastic pool Jane had set up at home. Just as I was about to head back, relieved, but I received another call from Betty.
Apprehensively, I answered, only to hear, "Don't make cakes that taste bad." It looked suspicious, so I tasted it first. I felt it so unhealthy, though I threw the garbage out the window.
In an instant, I realized this situation was a complete disaster.
"Did you throw away the cake? I'm still at work, and I didn't make that cake."
Turns out, she had thrown the cake out the window.
Hearing this fact, I panicked.
The cake was actually the highlight of the day, a surprise cake for Jane. Moreover, someone had painstakingly made it for her. Betty refused to believe that I hadn't made it.
"Huh? I can't believe someone who cooks regularly would make a cake like that. I was shocked you were planning to serve it. Shame on you."
And she completely refused to believe it. I decided to rush home to assess the situation.
Then, I heard Sally crying over the phone. The worst possible turn of events.
Apparently, the cake had fallen where Tom and Sally were playing outside.
The cake was a surprise that Tom and Sally had made for Jane the day before.
Originally, I had planned to make the cake. While talking to Mark, I learned Sally was enjoying helping out in the kitchen. Thinking it would be special, I suggested to Tom that Sally could help make the cake, to which he agreed enthusiastically.
Unfortunately, Betty was out at the time and unaware of this.
It was a plan to make Jane feel extra special with a cake made by her beloved Sally. Sally's crying was getting louder on the phone. Unable to stay put, I hurried to go home. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Tom was normally calm, but was raising his voice.
"Regardless of who made it, it's not right to just throw it away. And who opens the fridge in someone else's house as they please? Don't you have any common sense?"
To this, Betty responded,
"I just didn't want Sally to eat something strange.
Food is important. Unlike you, I'm taking parenting seriously." Betty and Tom started a heated argument. Jane was desperately trying to comfort Sally. I suspected Betty threw away the cake I made for out of spite. After handing Sally to Tom, Jane angrily confronted the situation.
How can you do something like this? This is not what adults do. Even children understand that. And what's this about organic? Feeding her only Danish all the time is not healthy. She needs a varied diet. Sally is the one suffering. This was the first time I saw Jane was angry. I was shocked.
But she voiced everything I couldn't say. Despite Betty was unyielding. She's just picky.
What's wrong with letting her eat Danish she likes? If I'm going to be criticized for every little thing, I won't bother leaving her with you anymore. I thought I was doing you a favor since you're always so free.
Tom couldn't stay silent.
Doing you a favor? Sally had been taken care of, isn't her? You're out every week, and is it your right attitude?
Tom was right. I knew Jane sometimes canceled her plans for Sally. Realizing Betty brought her over with such intentions made me feel sorry for Sally. Jane couldn't stay quiet either.
What do you think Sally is? Aren't you her mother? It's not okay to leave your child every week to have fun. Have you ever really thought about her picky eating? It won't get better by ignoring it. She barely plays outside, right? Her skin is so pale in the summer.
Betty was furious at this.
Girls should have white skin, and being small is cuter. Playing outside would make me tan too. It's just a cake, and you're blowing this out of proportion. You guys are creepy family.
I had been silent about something until now.
Betty had frequently harassed me.
For example, she secretly added a lot of salt to the food I made, making it too much salty. And some of the accessories I bought during my single days disappeared from our house. I seized the moment to reveal everything. Betty became quiet and embarrassed. Tom was shocked and kept apologizing. The atmosphere was far from celebratory. Tom revealed that he had seen unfamiliar accessories at their home. Betty quieted down after this.
I just borrowed them, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing.
Betty's excuses were painfully inadequate. Then, Sally spoke up.
Mom, it's not nice to be mean. If you want something from a friend, you have to ask. My kindergarten teacher said so. If you make a mistake, just say sorry and you can be friends again. If you made a mistake, Mom, just say sorry and it'll be okay. Everyone was instantly soothed by Sally's words.
Tom and his family understandably felt uncomfortable. Tom then said,
Maybe we should go home today.
He suggested. But I knew leaving now wouldn't be good.
It would make it awkward next time.
I insisted they stay.
I didn't want this milestone birthday party to end on a sour note.
I hurried to the fridge. I thought about what I could make with the leftovers from yesterday. Luckily, there was still cream and fruit.
There was still time.
I quickly shifted to hosting a crepe party. We had appetizers and steaks, too. I invited Sally to help me for making crepes. Sally was in a great mood again. Everyone was soothed by her cheerfulness, which helped them reset their emotions. The 60th birthday party for Jane finally started. Betty looked uncomfortable, but today was about celebrating Jane. We all enjoyed steaks, gave presents, and ate crepes. Sally's cheerful demeanor was soothing to everyone.
Children are angels, really.
I later learned that Betty had been quite domineering at home too. Since that incident, she had become much more subdued. In a way, it was a good opportunity, I think. This incident shed light on aspects that were previously unseen. Betty had a habit of overspending, indulging in daily lunches with her friends. Tom confronted her and learned everything. As a result, Tom took over managing their finances, which put an end to her extravagant spending. With less to do at home, Tom encouraged her to start a part-time job. It seemed she's finally feeling the challenges of working outside. It had been a long time since she had worked outside. At her part-time job, a veteran employee told her,
Someone with such a long break is not useful. It's not worth the hourly wage if you can't learn quickly. Get up to speed and become competent.
It appeared she was being trained quite rigorously. When she returns home unable to do much because of exhausted. Naturally, she's not making homemade organic meals anymore. Their reliance on prepared food from supermarkets were increased. However, there was a positive side to this change.
Sally started eating a lot more.
She was no longer interested in Danish, but in hamburgers, pizzas, and chicken tenders. It seems she had never enjoyed such kid-friendly meals before.
Children generally don't favor organic or low-carb diets.
Now, Sally says,
"For my birthday, I want to eat store-bought hamburgers and fried chicken."
Her appetite has improved.
While junk food isn't great every day, but enjoying what you eat is important. Enjoying food is also a part of food education.
Betty used to post about her organic dishes on social media. They were always stylishly presented, regardless of taste.
But after this incident, she stopped doing that.
It seems she was seeking validation through social media likes. It's the best for being stopped.
She's lucky she didn't end up in divorced.
Since that day, Betty has awkwardly stopped visiting. Now, Tom brings Sally over by himself.
Sally seemed more relaxed and free, even enjoying snacks now.
She appeared noticeably brighter and happier. And Jane is also happy to see the peace. As for us, we continue to live happily with Jane. And now, I'm expecting our first child.
The whole family is overjoyed.
We're all busy preparing baby items for the new addition. I hope we continue to live as a happy family.
Oh, exactly. I'm the eldest son. It's only right that I take over Dad's company.
Despite the impending funeral of Hugo, our late company president, my estranged older brother, blurted out such a statement as soon as he showed up. Huh? I couldn't help but let out a surprised murmur at my brother's words. Suddenly, Eugenie, my sister-in-law, raised her voice. Devin is saying he'll be the president. You get that, right? Normally the eldest son takes over the family business. As a younger sister, you should simply step aside. Whoa, Eugenie, lower your voice. The funeral is about to start.
Well then, admit it already that you're giving the company to me, or else we'll create a chaos at this funeral.
With smirks on their faces, they both stared at me. I had no idea that they were this insensitive. It felt like something taut within me, like a tightly drawn string just snapped. Dealing with these people was becoming more ridiculous by the second. Fine, I'll give it to you, but in return, get out of here right now. At my words, the two of them grinned.
No backing out later.
We are relieved you agreed so quickly, just like father-in-law. You're such an accommodating sister-in-law. Leaving those words behind, the couple left the venue. My name is Elsie. After losing my mother a few years ago, I have been living with Hugo. Despite being in his late 60s, Hugo remained active, astonishing even his own daughter with his vitality. Hugo ran his own company, where I also worked. Once I started working, I realized that Hugo, who I had always seen as strict during my childhood, was actually a man of great compassion. Hugo's stern and plain-spoken demeanor, both at home and in the office, were the result of a character that didn't allow for compromise, neither from himself nor others. I became aware of this because Hugo, who I had thought was cold, was highly respected and depended upon by his staff at the company. I used to wonder why these people would follow such a ruthless man. One day, I saw the reason firsthand.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, I received a call from our client, &Co., saying that the quantity of the goods we delivered yesterday was short.
The one saying this with a pale face was an employee named Tobin. &Co. is a valuable client of ours. Hugo's company isn't big and our main operation is transactions with major clients. In other words, every single issue with a major client is of considerable importance. Tobin continued, bowing his head.
It's my fault. They apparently need it today, so I'll hurry and deliver it right away. I'm really sorry.
To this employee, Hugo said,
Wait. I'll go too. It's my fault as the company's president when the company makes a mistake. Let's go apologize together.
Hugo stood from his seat and put on his suit jacket. They reported upon their return that our dealings with & Co. would continue. Apparently, after Hugo apologized, he presented a plan to prevent such mistakes in the future to & Co. & Co. was not only convinced by the plan, but also increased the volume of transactions due to Hugo's honest attitude and his good judgment in rectifying the mistake.
Given the time crunch for & Co.'s order, I shouldn't have left it all to Tobin. I should have confirmed it together. So don't blame yourself alone.
Tobin shared that Hugo had said these words to him on their way to the client. Tobin proudly spoke of Hugo, who had responsibility and also supported him. Then other employees started to talk about Hugo in unison. From their proud faces, I realized why Hugo was so loved. Thus, my expression of Hugo, which had been that of a cold and strict person, changed to that of a strict but caring person, and I began to respect and admire him, just like the other employees did. As my perception of Hugo changed, not only as a CEO but also as a father, I started to nurse a certain concern. The cause of my concern was my brother. I have a brother named Devin. My brother, rebelling against the strict Hugo, had left home as soon as he graduated from college and had never returned, not even when our mother passed away. A self-centered brother who didn't attend even our mother's funeral. But perhaps influenced by the loss of our mother, I started to reconsider the importance of family and wondered if I could somehow mend the relationship between Hugo and my brother. If he could know our father not only as a stern man, but also a caring one, their bad relationship might be resolved. The more I knew about Hugo's kindness, the stronger this thought became. Then one day, my brother came back with a woman. I was surprised by the sudden visit, but Hugo, though keeping his calm, seemed somewhat pleased. However, despite their reunion after several years, my brother started the conversation without showing any concern for Hugo or searching for our deceased mother.
Because of the debts, I can't live a proper life. Dad, please. Please take over my debts.
From me as well, please. The woman crying next to my brother who just said this was Eugenie, who he said was his wife. Without reporting to any of our family, my brother had married. He had married Eugenie, but due to the debts from his gambling, their married life wasn't going well. So he came back to ask Hugo for help. It's too much to ask. That's what I thought. But Hugo said,
Understood.
And that was it. When I looked at Hugo in surprise, he was staring at my brother and his wife with a serious look.
These are the conditions. Never gamble again to bear debts. Work hard for your family. Show up a few times a year. If you can keep these, I will pay your debts.
Even the strict Hugo must have been pleased with the reunion with his long-lost son. The amount of debt my brother was carrying wasn't something you would take over with these conditions. However, if this could improve the relationship between Hugo and my brother little by little, that might be enough. After all, Hugo accepted it under these conditions, so it's not my place to comment. I convinced myself of that.
Oh, thanks, Dad. You saved me.
As soon as Hugo agreed to take over the debt, my brother quickly explained the transfer destination for the money and left our house. I wasn't without concern about my brother's attitude, but above all, I was genuinely happy that Hugo and my brother had a reunion after a long time. The usually quiet Hugo mentioned my brother's name several times that day. He must have been very pleased. But people don't change so easily. Nearly 2 years have passed since my brother visited Hugo, but my brother hasn't shown up since then. Moreover, the debt kept increasing every month, and even though it was being paid back, bills kept coming to Hugo. During that time, I contacted my brother many times. Even though I blamed him for not meeting the conditions given by Hugo, my brother wouldn't listen.
It's between Dad and me, so don't interfere.
And he would hang up the phone every time. Then one day, Hugo told me something.
It seems I have pancreatic cancer. They say I have about a year to live.
What? Because it was so sudden, I was at a loss for words. After all, Hugo was so energetic that even I and the employees acknowledged it. Hugo having cancer and only a year left to live? But Hugo is not a man who jokes. Both the cancer and the prognosis must be true. It's futile to be flustered here. What I have to do now is to support Hugo. From then on, I started learning the work that Hugo had been doing and studying management myself. Hugo was also proactive in mentoring me. Perhaps he was ensuring that things would be all right regardless of what happened to him. The thought made me feel complicated, but when I thought about the company that Hugo had always protected and the employees with whom he had worked, there was no room for complaints. Then, several months later, Hugo was admitted to the hospital. Even during his hospitalization, it seemed that my brother had been contacted to make debt payments.
Sorry, but could you make the payment on my behalf?
When Hugo said that to me, I was so outraged that I called my brother as soon as I left the hospital and raised my voice. Didn't I tell you before Dad has cancer? He's in the hospital right now, and yet you're asking for money? What are you thinking? Why don't you visit him once before you say such things? But my brother's attitude only got worse. He responded in an irritated voice as if saying it was a bother.
So what? Whether it's cancer or anything else, Dad shouldered it, so it's natural to pay.
Brother, aren't you breaking Dad's conditions? You never show up, and you're increasing the debt every month. Plus, I heard you're going to the casino every day with Eugenie.
Shut up, both Eugenie and I are gambling to increase our money.
Unable to accept his excuse, I exclaimed, "What?" And I could hear a woman's voice from the back of the phone. "Tell him we're happy, because our father-in-law is paying the debt and we can enjoy ourselves without worrying." Probably my sister-in-law. I could also hear their laughter as if making fun of us.
Hey, if you say things like that and we can't get the debt paid, what will you do?
But he's not going to survive, right? We thought we should express our gratitude while we can. Plus, wasn't it Devin who said, "Such a father, he's just here for the money"? Hearing their conversation, I impulsively hung up the phone. Unknowingly, my clenched fist was shaking. Without making the payment Hugo asked for, I returned to Hugo's hospital room and told him about the phone conversation. I knew it might shock him, but I just couldn't stand it. Hugo listened to my story, was silent for a while, then turned a serious face towards me and nodded slightly.
Elsie, I have a favor to ask.
I was taken aback by what he said. Then, a few months later, Hugo passed away and went to heaven. Many people came to see Hugo's face at the wake. But at the funeral today, even more people are gathering. Uncle Godwin, who is Hugo's cousin, is joining me in greeting those who came to the funeral. I tried contacting my brother on the day Hugo passed away, but he didn't answer the phone and didn't respond to my emails. "Uncle Godwin, thank you for everything." When I said that, Uncle Godwin made a modest smile.
It's fine. Elsie, you must have been through a lot. Let me know if there's anything else I can help with.
You have helped me more than enough. Thanks for being here, even though it was short notice. Just as Uncle Godwin and I were talking.
Hey, Elsie, we're here.
It was my brother and sister-in-law who showed up. I sighed at their arrival. Why didn't you reply to my contacts? It should be you, as the eldest son, who should be in charge of the funeral, right?
Those two troublesome. Besides, I have something to talk to you about.
With that, my brother crossed his arms and stood arrogantly. My sister-in-law standing next to him had a smirk on her face.
You just mentioned me as the eldest son, right?
Yeah, so what?
Yeah, I'm the eldest son. That's why I'll take over Dad's company.
What? At my brother's words, I let out a voice unconsciously. Suddenly, my sister-in-law raised her voice. "David is going to be the president. You get it too, right? It's only natural for the eldest son to take over the company. The younger sister should step aside quietly." What? Oh, wait a minute. Eugenie, keep your voice down. The funeral is about to start.
Well then, acknowledge that you'll pass the company to me quickly. Otherwise, we will make a mess of this funeral.
They gave us a vile smile. I didn't know that they could be so uncivil. It felt like a taut string had been abruptly cut. It seemed ridiculous to even bother with these people anymore. Fine, I'll give it to you, my dear brother, but in return, get out of here right now. At my words, they grinned widely.
Don't you dare go back on your word later.
I'm relieved that it ended quicker than I thought, just like our father-in-law, such a convenient sister-in-law. With those words, the couple left the venue. A few days later, I received persistent contact from my brother, which led me to accompany the couple to the company. My brother, perhaps having bought new clothes, was dressed in a flashy suit, and my sister-in-law wore a ring adorned with large jewels and a gaudy necklace. As expected, my sister-in-law, flaunting her ring, struck up a conversation with me.
I bought it because I'm becoming the president's wife. How is it? Isn't it lovely?
With my emotions drained, I replied, "Indeed." Even with such a curt reply, my sister-in-law seemed satisfied and proud. However, her smug expression soon distorted. Upon reaching the company, my brother, ignoring me, clapped his hands loudly.
I am the president from now on. Everyone, follow my orders.
With that, my brother looked content, and my sister-in-law, standing beside him, wore a triumphant expression.
Now, this $30 million revenue company is my husband's. I am the president's wife. I'm looking forward to our life from now on.
With a scornful glance at me, my sister-in-law laughed loudly, flaunting her ring once more. But the very next moment, a wave of laughter erupted within the company. Hugo's subordinates, all the employees, began to burst into laughter. Unable to comprehend the situation, the couple, losing their earlier smug smiles, looked upset.
What's so funny?
I don't know. Did you say something weird?
My brother answered, flustered, in response to my sister-in-law, who was yelling out of irritation. Seeing this, I couldn't help but laugh. Noticing me laughing, my sister-in-law shot a sharp glance at me and started yelling,
You know something. What did you do? What's so funny?
"Oh, it's just funny to see something that's not even yours being claimed so brazenly."
What?
Hearing my words, my sister-in-law screamed and my brother yelled.
What do you mean?
Indeed, the president of this company isn't my brother. From the time of the funeral, neither my brother nor I had any authority to take over Hugo's company. That's because Hugo's company had already been sold. When I found out that my brother and his wife only saw Hugo as a cash cow, Hugo made a request to me. That was to sell the company.
I made a mistake raising Devin. While I'm alive, it's fine, but I don't want to cause trouble for you after I'm gone.
Hugo, saying this, made up his mind to let go of the company for my sake. Of course, I opposed it, but Hugo's determination was unwavering. From then on, while still in the hospital, Hugo spent busy days talking with Uncle Godwin, who runs the company, about buying the company, discussing the future of the company with each employee. Thus, the company was safely handed over. All the employees were satisfied with the sale of the company, as Hugo explained it earnestly, and their conditions did not change. And a few weeks after Hugo passed away, the purchase agreement was signed and the company was already in the hands of Uncle Godwin. Despite this, my brother was saying things like,
I'm the president and
The company's my husband's.
how could I not laugh at this? I'm sure not just me, but all the employees were holding back their laughter since the funeral. I summed this up and explained it to my brother and his wife. Upon learning that the company was already up for sale before either of us siblings decided to take it over, my brother and his wife turned pale.
wait a minute. You told me you would hand over the company to me. What was all that about?
That. I thought if I didn't say it, you would make a mess of Dad's funeral.
So you're saying this company won't be ours? What should we do? We bought this ring and this necklace on credit again. What about that money?
At my words, my sister-in-law began to yell in rage. My sister-in-law continued to blame my brother, saying,
You have to do something.
In his fluster, my brother seemed to realize something and a sleazy smile crept across his face again.
That's right. Dad left an inheritance, didn't he? I'm the eldest son. Hand over all of Dad's inheritance.
Upon hearing the word inheritance, my sister-in-law, who had been openly angry until a moment ago, changed her tone.
That's right, inheritance. He was the CEO, so there should be a lot, right? Oh, good. We don't have to worry about our debts and we can keep having fun.
I dealt my sister-in-law, who was relieved and saying such things, a cruel blow. No inheritance is left for my brother. By father's will, he has been excluded from the heirs. Indeed, Hugo not only sold the company but also left a will with a lawyer present so that the inheritance would not go to my brother. It stated that Hugo, who had been repeatedly covering my brother's substantial gambling debts, excluded my brother from the heirs.
That's ridiculous.
My brother argued, but I coldly brushed him off, saying, "Why don't you hire a lawyer or something? It's a waste of money, though."
I can't believe it. I quit my job thinking I would get the company, and I can't even get an inheritance?
The two, having lost their last hope, left the company in a daze. After the two had left, the employee told me, "That was well done." My brother, who had quit his job in anticipation of getting the company, apparently couldn't find a decent job afterwards. My sister-in-law, who thought she would become the wife of the CEO, also had her dreams dashed and seems to be considering divorce from my brother, but she can't even afford to do so because she has no money. The two seem to be living a life of paying off debts while working part-time all day and having quarrels every day. Meanwhile, I have been working together with the same staff as before, even after the president became Uncle Godwin. Thanks to Hugo's efforts during his lifetime, not only have we been able to continue our relationships with our clients as before after the acquisition, but also thanks to Uncle Godwin, we have more clients and our annual sales are on the rise. This company will surely continue to undergo various changes, but I think it's my role to keep protecting this company, respecting and embodying Hugo's ideas. To achieve that, I will continue to work hard.
Emily, how many times do I have to tell you? Hurry up, your dad is waiting.
I'm sorry, I'll bring it right away.
Jeez, you're so clueless. I can't believe you work for a big company.
This one's a real piece of work, isn't she? Why did Jackson even marry her?
Well, she makes good money and she's easy on the eyes.
Yeah, I guess she is pretty and has a good figure.
I am Emily. I am 30 years old and have been married for 3 months. So I'm basically a newlywed. I live with my husband, Jackson's family. Living with in-laws is not so common these days, but my husband says it's natural because he's an only child. I don't know anyone among my friends who does this, so it doesn't feel natural to me. But I keep my mouth shut because speaking up only leads to yelling. I do work for a major company and make a decent salary. My husband works for a small to medium-sized business, so he doesn't make as much. I might even make close to 1.5 times his salary. He doesn't seem to mind depending on a woman's income. Before we got married, he said he'd take care of everything and that I didn't have to work if I didn't want to. But after we got married, I ended up being treated like a servant. Not just by my husband, but also by my mother-in-law and father-in-law. I can't stand any of them. My mother-in-law is the worst. She seems to take pleasure in making my life miserable. Every time she sees me, she scowls and starts complaining.
Oh, you're going out?
Yes, I have a meeting today, so I have to leave early.
Putting on so much makeup. Is there someone you like at your workplace?
No, there's no one.
Don't lie. A woman who puts that much effort into her makeup must be interested in a man. Ugh, disgusting.
That's not true. I'm just trying out a new eyeshadow I bought.
Fine, just go already.
I wasn't even wearing that much makeup. Just a subtle, office-friendly beige eyeshadow. Though it was a new brand I picked up on my way home yesterday. Even so, it's just a plain beige. No glitter or anything. But women tend to notice other women's makeup changes. I couldn't understand the need for snide comments as I headed to work. When I got home, everyone was waiting at Jackson's family house.
Hey, Emily, Bring me a drink, will ya?
Sure.
Where the hell are my appetizers?
Here they are.
What? What is this? Who can eat this crap?
Oh, you don't like it?
Nah, it's awful. Make it again. I don't need this.
My husband tossed the appetizers I made into the sink, and he looked pleased with his petty grin. I felt an instant wave of sadness. Why do I have to endure this treatment every day? What on earth did I do to deserve this? Just then, my husband chimed in.
You have some money, right?
What?
I've been thinking. I want to move into a new house. Right, Mom and Dad?
Yes, I'd love a new house, his mother said.
If you take out a 35-year mortgage for a new house, I'll treat you better. You'll move up from servant to housekeeper. No, to a roommate.
Really?
No, I was wrong all this time. Please forgive me. Just buy a house and I'll truly cherish you as my wife and never say anything terrible again.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm serious.
At that moment, I made a wrong judgment. I couldn't see through my husband's convincing act. Desperate to escape the demeaning treatment, I went along with it and took out a 35-year mortgage to buy a house. I thought it might mend my relationship with my husband. Maybe I'd get to understand him better and truly cherish him. With a glimmer of hope, I decided to buy a house. Finally, the new house was complete.
Wow, this is nice. My room looks amazing.
I can't believe we get to live in such a beautiful home.
My study looks awesome too.
But a tough situation was waiting for me. My husband became even more reckless with money and stopped contributing to the household expenses. He also started going out every night. I wondered if he was hitting the bars. I had always contributed more to our living expenses. It wasn't that my husband gave nothing. His contributions helped. Now, he's giving zero, not a cent. So, I had no choice but to work as hard as I could. My main job couldn't possibly cover the mortgage, so I started a side gig. My company allows side gigs, so I took on jobs I could do from home. I couldn't earn much due to my lack of skills. However, as I got the hang of it, my earnings increased, and I was glued to my computer late every night. Gradually, this took a toll on my body. Before I knew it, I was exhausted and even developed a fever. I'm hot. I feel dizzy. After a meeting at work, I tried to stand up, but collapsed. That's when I was rushed to the hospital. When I regained consciousness, I was lying in a hospital bed. Where am I? Oh, right, I collapsed. What should I do? I still have pending tasks. I checked my phone and saw messages on WhatsApp from colleagues and superiors telling me to take it easy. I felt blessed to have such caring colleagues. As I was looking at my phone, the door burst open. It was my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law! She rustled through her bag and pulled out some papers. Here it comes again. I assumed it was about divorcing my husband. Sign this paper! I couldn't see well without my glasses, but I managed to scribble my signature. So we both had our personal seals with us, and we used them to finalize the documents. The reason I wasn't wearing my glasses? I broke them when I collapsed at work. So yeah, my handwriting probably looked atrocious. It wasn't illegible or anything, but without my glasses, that's the best I could do. Now I can give you $5 million. What? You don't have your glasses. Can you see it if I hold it this close? This is
That's right. It's a gift agreement. Normally, anyone would see that a divorce petition and a gift agreement are completely different in format. But I had thought mother-in-law was planning to force me into signing a divorce paper because she's always been out to get me. When I wore new eyeshadow once, she accused me of cheating, so I thought she was trying to frame me. Then she'd snatch the alimony from me in a divorce lawsuit. But that wasn't it at all. As I stood there completely baffled, mother-in-law began to cry quietly. I'm so sorry, Emily. Please forgive me. What's going on? Her sudden tears threw me off. Did I say something wrong? But I hadn't said anything to hurt her. So I was utterly confused and even more panicked. Truth is, I was told to harass you, or else they'd do something terrible to me. What? Your father and Jackson, they treat you like a servant, right? I wanted to treat you well, but they said I had to harass you too. Really? Once, when you weren't around, I suggested we stop bullying you. They yelled at me and sold something valuable of mine. I'm so sorry. I was weak. I see. Was my mother-in-law told this by them? So that's why my mother-in-law had been so awful to me. I want to give you $5 million as a way to make amends. No, I can't accept that much money. Let's cancel what we just did. It's fine. I don't have much time left. I want you to have it. What? I have cancer. What? What a twist. I never knew my mean mother-in-law who had been tormenting me had cancer. And apparently it's pretty advanced. She said she doesn't want to spend her last days in a hospital because it won't get her better. Instead, she's been going to a clinic that specializes in palliative care. I only have a few more visits to the clinic. I want to give you something before I'm gone. But what about my husband and father-in-law if they find out? Don't worry about them. What's important is that you find happiness. I know I don't have the right to say this, but please leave my son. Mother-in-law, promise me you'll find happiness. It's my last wish. Yes, I understand. I'll make sure to do that. I was crying. I never knew that the woman I hated so much was actually thinking about me. And where did the $5 million come from? Turns out, it was left by her late father, who was incredibly wealthy. Given that Jackson's family home looks totally average, mother-in-law must have been saving the inheritance. She insisted that it was okay for her to give me this significant amount, though I had no idea what to do with such a staggering sum. So I accepted it. After that, I recovered and left the hospital. I took some time off before going back to work. And there's one thing I want to do before that. It's to divorce my husband. Can you leave this house? What? This is my house. I'm the one who's been paying the mortgage, and it's in my name. I don't need you anymore. Don't get smart with me. Since when did you become so important? I'm certainly more important than you. Sneaking out to the other women's homes at night. What? I noticed unfamiliar makeup or something on your shirt. I hired a detective because I suspected you were cheating. What did you just say? See this picture? All lovey-dovey on a date? Gross. So physically close. That's, I have plenty more evidence. Wanna see? This is truly revolting. What is this? Disgusting.
My husband looked pale as a ghost. He must have thought he'd never get caught cheating. At first I thought maybe he was at a pub. After all, he enjoys drinking outside. Turns out, he was spending time at a younger woman's house, and they were, well, involved. I was disgusted. Why had I let this terrible man boss me around all this time? If I had been stronger, I could have stood up to him. But the old me was isolated at Jackson's family home. So, I had no allies and couldn't say a word. I was scared, and it's embarrassing to admit. But now it's different. I have my powerful mother-in-law by my side.
Really? What a repulsive son I have. I can't believe he's my child. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm done listening to you too. Right, Emily?
Yes.
How dare you betray me? Mom, are you okay with this? Are you threatening me? I'll report you to the police if you use dangerous words. Don't get out of your place, woman. Men are superior to women. Know your place. Enough! You shut up too, you cheater! What? You were cheating too, right? Like father, like son. What a disgrace. Give me back my life. No.
Unbelievably, my father-in-law had been cheating too. I was unaware of this and utterly shocked. What a bunch of creeps. They felt like creatures from another dimension.
You and Jackson will be paying damages in the divorce court, got it? What? I don't want to pay. You've got Grandpa's inheritance. That should be enough. That inheritance went to Emily. What? Huh? We made a formal agreement for a living gift. What? Why would you give it to her? I could have used it. I wanted to inherit it. Look, you guys weren't even going to get the stuff set aside for you in the first place. What? Truth is, I have terminal cancer. I'll be gone soon. You guys can't inherit anything because you treated Emily so poorly. You've made my life miserable, and your dad's been cheating for years. You don't deserve anything. What the heck is going on? This is outrageous.
They had made mother-in-law's life unbearable. They did things too cruel to even put into words. That's why they couldn't inherit anything, not even the stuff set aside for them. I thought, how foolish. Had they not acted that way, they would have at least received what was initially set aside.
So, get out. I never want to see your face again. You, get out too. What? Hey!
Mother-in-law and I kicked our husbands out, and we locked the door from the inside.
Thank you, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I don't want to go to the hospital, but I heard the palliative care units are quite nice now, so I've decided to check in.
Is that so?
I've been healthy all my life and wanted to spend my last moments at home, but a hospital feels safer.
Well, there are doctors and nurses. So mother-in-law checked into a hospital with a palliative care unit. 2 months later, she passed away. I guess it was really the end for her. After that, I went through with the divorce. Mother-in-law had already divorced before her passing. I was able to secure a settlement from my ex-husband during the divorce trial. He came to the house and begged to be let in. He apparently has no more money, even for a budget hotel stay. He had been wasting money on gambling and giving gifts to women. I wondered why I had ever married him in the first place. I had no knack for picking the right guy. Not a single redeeming quality.
I got dumped by Olivia, and now I have nowhere to live.
Olivia? The woman you cheated with?
Yeah, can you believe she left me for some guy who makes more money and looks better? I've been trying my best here.
Well, I wouldn't want you either if I were her. You had your fun with younger women. Consider it a life lesson. I hung up the annoying call from my ex-husband right away, and then I blocked his number. I've already received the settlement from the divorce. There's no need to keep in touch. As for what happens to him next, it's none of my concern. I don't know how my father-in-law is doing, but rumor has it he's disliked by the entire family. He's being avoided for being the worst kind of man, who always belittled his wife and didn't even attend her funeral. I used to despise my mother-in-law, but not anymore. Sure, she was weak and felt the need to harass me, but thanks to her, I've become stronger in some ways. I'm planning to visit her grave and clean it on her monthly Memorial Day.
Taking only my valuables, I dash out of the house, running down the busy streets towards the train station. I run up the stairs of the station. At the platform, I wait for the train to my hometown as I try to suppress my anxiety. I look around nervously to see if anyone is following me, but I don't even know what I'm running from. I don't know why I've had to give up on the honeymoon I was looking forward to and have ended up being forced to run. But I'm trying to flee from this town as I trusted my husband telling me to run. My name is Megan. I'm an office worker who just turned 30. Despite always feeling like a newcomer, I found myself in a position to teach others before I knew it, leading a busy life. I have a fiancé, Bob, and we're getting married next year. Bob is my colleague at work, and 3 years younger. He's so mature and reliable that my colleagues often tease me, saying, "We can't tell who's older." He's a man who commands trust from superiors and subordinates alike, handles household chores flawlessly, and I think he's an ideal partner for marriage. Except for one thing. One weekend, we needed to visit my in-laws' house together. As we opened the door to the living room, 2 women are relaxing, sipping tea. "Welcome home, Bob." "Welcome back, Bobby." Ignoring me completely, the women greet him with sparkling smiles and Bob sighs.
Why's Catherine here again?
"Well, Catherine is like a daughter to us, right?"
Right, Mom? Oh, if I become Bobby's wife, I'll really be your daughter.
"Oh, how wonderful." Bob sighs again as my mother-in-law and Catherine start giggling and making a fuss. I was filled with the urge to go home right then and there. Catherine is a neighbor of my in-laws and Bob's childhood friend. They've been close since they were babies, up until high school. Catherine has beautiful eyes and a slender figure, and with her expertise in acting cute, she's the type of girl that men can't leave alone. For some reason, she's fixated on Bob. And it started right after Bob told his parents about our engagement. She's been aggressively texting Bob, inviting him out for drinks, and whispering things like, "I'll feel sad if you get married," and "Didn't you propose to me when we were little?" I felt uneasy at Catherine's assertiveness and asked Bob if he was interested in his cute childhood friend. To that, he made a disgusted face.
"She juggled 5 guys at once in the soccer team in high school. In college, she seemed to only date men who had girlfriends or wives. I'm too scared to marry a woman with no sense of chastity like that."
Well, you're right. I was taken aback by Catherine's lack of fidelity, but relieved to know that Bob was not swayed by her. But my mother-in-law is on Catherine's side. She's trying to push me out by flaunting her closeness with Catherine. Apparently, she doesn't like me because I'm older than her son, taller, and work too hard for a woman. She seems to be unaware of Catherine's wildness and thinks that Catherine, who who at first glance appears elegant and obedient, would be easy to handle and boast about as a daughter-in-law. Because of those two, we faced the worst possible experience at our wedding a month later. Unbelievably, Catherine, who wasn't even invited, showed up at the reception. And she wore a pure white dress, which of course only the bride is supposed to wear. Of course, it wasn't as lavish as a bridal gown, but the fact that it was white didn't change. And she was the center of attention in the venue in many ways. What was even scarier was that during the reception, she had the audacity to sit at the family table where my mother-in-law was. During our slideshow, and even during our friends' speeches, I couldn't help but be bothered by her chatting it up with my mother-in-law. When they approached our table at one point, my husband argued with them, as he tried to hold back his anger. "Catherine, you weren't invited, and you're wearing a white dress. And sitting at the family table, what the heck are you thinking? What are you doing, Mom?"
"But it's my childhood friend's wedding. I can't not celebrate it, and white matches my skin the best."
"Oh, I agree. The white dress looks really good on your fair skin. You look the best in this venue. I requested the seat because you forgot to prepare it. Don't worry, I'm sharing the meal with her." Ugh. My husband, unable to vent his frustration, looked down in despair. Looking at my father-in-law, who was at the family table, he had an apologetic look on his face. Although my father-in-law is a decent man, he's weak-willed and probably got bulldozed over by his wife. We've been eagerly preparing and looking forward to this day for nearly a year. It's so frustrating I feel like crying, but if I cry now, it will only please these two. I'm not going to show them my tears. When I raised my face and smiled at Catherine, I saw the corners of her eyes twitch. "Coming to celebrate even though you weren't invited? Catherine, you're really thoughtful of your friends, aren't you?" "Huh?" Catherine grimaced. "And it's so nice of you to share half your meal. Please do share half of your favorite filet mignon as well." "Oh." My mother-in-law's eyes wandered. "Oh, it's almost time for me to change outfits, so please step back. I'm sorry I'm so busy. I mean, I am the main event after all." With that said, and showing a calm smile, the attendant who was with me said, "Can we please let other people take pictures with the newlyweds, please?" and kindly moved them out of our way. I was grateful for her excellent work. Catherine glared at me for a moment with demonic eyes, but then immediately plastered on a cutesy, idol-like smile and left. I'm sorry I'm not the weak woman who would cry and wail. Thanks to the excellent attendant and the staff, the reception turned out all right. I was exhausted, but aside from those two, I received heartfelt blessings from everyone else and was able to fully appreciate the happiness. We didn't start living together right after our marriage. Since job transfers are announced at the end of the fiscal year, we thought it would be safer to find a new home afterwards. So, for our honeymoon trip planned 2 weeks after the wedding, we each planned to leave from our own homes and meet up at the airport. Once we start living together, there'll be fewer chances for rendezvous, so I thought it'd be fun to do something that feels like we're still dating. The destination for our honeymoon is Italy. My mind was filled with the allure of Italy, especially it being my first overseas trip. I was thrilled and excited each day leading up to it. However, my excitement was about to be ruined by the two. On the day of the honeymoon, while I was nervously opening and closing the suitcase, checking that I hadn't forgotten anything, I got a call from my husband. "Hey, what's up? We're meeting up at 1 p.m., right?" "I'm sorry." "Huh?" Contrary to my easygoing self, my husband screams in a desperate voice, "We have to cancel the honeymoon. Please don't come to the meetup spot." "What?" "Listen, don't leave the apartment. No, actually, leave right now and go back to your parents' home, please." Wait a minute, what's going on?" "I'm sorry, I'll explain later. Just leave right now." Stunned, I stare at the phone after being abruptly disconnected. I have no idea what's going on, but my good mood has suddenly gone down the drain after hearing my husband being frantic. Could he possibly be involved in some sort of crime? The mere thought sends chills down my spine. With my legs about to buckle from all the anxiety, I force myself to move and decide to return to my parents' home as per my husband's instructions. Naturally, my parents are in a panic. Their daughter, who was supposed to be going on her honeymoon, has come home with a pale face. Seeing the disgraceful behavior of my mother-in-law at our wedding, they were even more worried. Even if I wanted to explain the situation, I too was at a loss because I didn't know why I was there. Then I got a call from an unknown number. I sensed something was not right. It was the police. Fearing that I was indeed involved in a crime, I pressed the answer button with bated breath. The police officer, with a much softer voice than I expected, explained why he had called.
We got a call about a couple of women screaming and banging on your apartment door. They seemed quite agitated, so we took them into custody. The older woman claims to be your mother.
What? Wait, me? Because I had put the call on speakerphone, my mother, who was listening next to me, let out a bewildered shout. Even the police officer on the other end, hearing my mother's voice, seemed taken aback with a surprised, "Huh?" I was dumbfounded for a moment, but I soon realized who the older woman was. It was my mother-in-law, and I assume Catherine is with her too. I don't know why they came to my house on the day of our honeymoon, but I'm sure they're the reason my husband was panicking. Our flight was now hours ago. Because of these people, our honeymoon is gone. No Venice, no pizza, no pasta, no tiramisu, no maritozzo, all of which I was looking forward to. This is awful, just awful. I'm never forgiving them. My mother is sitting right next to me. Those people are complete strangers, I stated firmly to the police officer. Hold on, Megan, it's me. I could hear my mother-in-law screaming from the other end of the phone, but the officer must have sensed something as he smoothly ended the call with,
"Thank you for your cooperation."
I suspect that my mother-in-law and the others came to my apartment with the intention of causing me harm. How crazy is it that they would claim to be my mother when they're in trouble? Several hours passed. My husband showed up at my parents' house late into the night. As I suspected, the ones who were held by the police were my mother-in-law and Catherine. Somehow, they found out that we were meeting at the airport, and they had planned to stop me from going to Italy. Then Catherine planned to run up to my husband, waiting at the airport, and lie to him, saying, "Your wife has run off with another man," planning to comfort my distraught husband, and maybe even take my place on our honeymoon and deepen their relationship. I wonder if they really thought they could easily take my place right before departure. It's not like this lie wouldn't be exposed when we returned from our honeymoon. What short-sighted thinking, I thought. But their dreadful plan didn't end there. After stopping me, they intended to take me to a man my mother-in-law had chosen. To my mother-in-law's 50-year-old unemployed brother. For that purpose, they had Catherine's cousins waiting in a car, which gave me chills. If this plan went through with my mother-in-law's brother and me, and my husband and Catherine, my mother-in-law thought we probably wouldn't be able to stay as a couple. It was a terrifying plan. How my husband found out about this terrifying plan was thanks to my father-in-law. He happened to hear my mother-in-law and the others making plans and secretly contacted my husband. My husband was planning to do a little work before heading to the airport, so when my father-in-law called, he was still at work. He immediately called me in a panic. By the time he delegated his work to a colleague and arrived at my apartment, my mother-in-law and the others had apparently already been taken away. After that, he went to the police with my father-in-law, sorted out various things, and finally managed to get here. My husband apologized profusely for the actions of my mother-in-law and the others, and for our cancelled honeymoon. He did everything he possibly could, and seeing how worn out he had become in just one day, I couldn't bring myself to blame him. But I will never forgive my mother-in-law and Catherine. I will never forgive them no matter what. From that day on, I switched from defense to offense. First, I claimed for the cost of repairs to my apartment door that they had destroyed, various fees to the management company, and the cancellation fees for the honeymoon. Apparently, they were enraged, thinking I was playing hooky, and kicked the door, and even hit it with a nearby fire extinguisher. The door was a new high-end one that I had just replaced, so the repair cost was high. I also had splurged on the honeymoon, so everything in total came close to $20,000. Of course, they resisted.
No, I'm not the one to blame. It's Bob who won't admit he loves me.
All I wanted was your happiness, Bob. Huh? I get it.
Bob, you really are kind.
If you're not willing to pay, we're going to court.
Court?
If we go to court, we'll also pursue the fact that you tried to kidnap my wife. The costs and the amount claimed are likely to increase. At the mention of the word court, the mother-in-law began to tremble, and Catherine began to sob.
But Bob, you forgive me, right? I'm your precious girl, aren't I?
I'll never forgive you.
Eek!
Catherine let out a small shriek at the cold glare of my husband.
But I love you so much, it's cruel. You do love me too, don't you, Bob?
There's no way I could love a woman who casually dates 5 guys at once or goes out with a married man. What? 5 guys? The mother-in-law looks at Catherine in shock. I also back up my husband. You say you love Bob, but you only started saying that after he and I got engaged, right? Even if you're not interested in a man, you suddenly want him when he's someone else's. You. The mother-in-law glares at Catherine. She must have hit a nerve. Catherine's eyes dart around in panic. Then she points at my mother-in-law and shouts,
You're the main culprit. She tried to use me because she didn't like her daughter-in-law.
Oh my, you're trying to pin the blame on me? Bob, this woman led me astray. I tried to stop this terrible thing.
What?
The two began to argue fiercely, as if they're about to grapple with each other. The two of them, who had been so friendly, have suddenly broke up. What a fragile friendship. In the end, Catherine's parents and the father-in-law intervened, and it was decided to split the claim amount exactly in half. Catherine's parents, who had not noticed their daughter's disgraceful behavior at all, were very apologetic. We brought in a lawyer and filed a restraining order for Catherine and the mother-in-law. Of course, the mother-in-law refused in tears, but their plan was so malicious, even though it was foiled. Neither I nor my husband intended to forgive them. 3 years later, we were living peacefully with our newborn child when a man visited our home. The man, who was stylishly dressed in an expensive suit, introduced himself as Catherine's fiancé. I went back to Catherine's parents' house to say hello, and I happened to meet one of her classmates who told me,
Wasn't she supposed to steal Bob?
Oh. My husband, hearing Catherine's name for the first time in a long time, face palms. The classmate Catherine and her fiancé met must have attended our wedding and seen Catherine's disgrace. I thought it was a joke, but I was concerned about Catherine's pale face. I'm sorry, but I had it investigated. You and Catherine were childhood friends, but you're not dating now, are you? Of course not. We've never even dated. When my husband emphatically said this, the fiancé looked relieved. But she might be dating someone other than me. What? The Catherine I know is the type who dates a different guy every day of the week. What? Even though she wasn't invited to our wedding, she showed up wearing a white dress and brazenly sat at the family table. No way. I think if you're going to investigate, you should widen the scope, not just me. All right. Catherine's fiancé responded in a faint voice, then staggered away from our house. It seemed they really did carry out an investigation afterward, and Catherine's history with men embarrassingly came to light. It turns out Catherine's fiancé was the son of a somewhat prominent CEO, and the entire family was furious at Catherine, who had falsely portrayed herself as a chaste woman. Apparently, she had been dating several men while engaged, and not only was the engagement called off, but she's also apparently being sued for damages. If she hadn't let her desire to steal someone else's man get in the way of our wedding, she might have made it to a life of luxury without anyone finding out. Well, her true nature would have been exposed eventually. But this is way too much poetic justice. My mother-in-law seems to be fretting over not being able to meet her first grandchild. She's apparently watching with bated breath as my father-in-law cheerfully brings baby supplies over to our house. There have been several instances where baby clothes were sent via my father-in-law, but I sent them back without even looking at them. Catherine was dumped by her fiancé and drowning in debt, and my mother-in-law was unable to see her beloved son and grandchild. Right now, them being neighbors, they seem to get in a catfight every time they see each other. The neighbors who have to witness these ugly disputes are certainly not enjoying it. Hey Megan, how about we visit the Miami Seaquarium on the second day, and on the third day, let's head to Key West. I heard there's the Overseas Highway.
Sounds beautiful. I also want to eat seafood at a Cuban restaurant. I want to swim with the fishies.
This year, as our son turns 3, we're planning to take the honeymoon we never got to have. Our destination is Florida. The main goal is to show our son dolphins. Of course, we also plan on trying all the food specialties like Cuban food. We haven't given up on Italy, which we had to put off because our son was still too young. It may be far off in the future, but if it's with my husband, we can make it happen. All because I feel so content and happy every day.